Welcome back. Let's have this discussion now. So Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Communication is calling for urgent frameworks to regulate podcasts. It follows public outrage over derogatory remarks made by popular podcaster Macgyver MacG Mukwevho against media personality Minnie Dlamini. Committee Chair Khusela Diko joins us this evening for more on this. Thank you so much for joining us. And, obviously there was the spark, which was these comments that have gotten so many people angry. I mean, I saw just the commentary on social media, absolutely shocking, what was said. But talk to me about your initial response to those comments and then how that became a conversation around needing to create a framework for podcasting. Take us through that journey.
Good evening, Naledi, and good evening to your viewers. Thank you so very much for inviting us on the program. I wouldn't like to center the discussion on Mr. Mukwevho in particular, but I must say that obviously what happened with the comments that he made, I mean, we spoke to them being misogynistic. We felt that they were hurtful. We felt that it was unjustified shaming. But they were not the reason for this particular debate. What they assisted to do was to put a spotlight on the work that the committee had started quite a while ago. In fact, as early as when we got into office last year. Now, I want to speak to why it's important, Naledi. These podcasts are not just platforms that people think exist, on X or on YouTube or anywhere else. These are huge platforms with huge following. I was reading research recently that speaks to the fact that in totality, they have about 3.2 million viewers in the country. PwC estimates that those numbers could grow as much as up to 19 million. Now, these are not small platforms. They rival our radio stations. They rival the viewership of our television stations. And it's important that when people have such platforms, they're able to use them responsibly. And what that means is that you need to ensure that you have a commentary that is not harmful expression. You need to ensure that where it is such commentary are made, they are truthful, they are fair, there's no misinformation. So we started work around that. Now, the reason podcasts in South Africa are currently not regulated is because our laws are outdated. The Broadcasting Act, which regulates the broadcasting sector, is an act from 1999. The Electronic Communications Act, which is the overarching legislation over the ICT industry, that's a law from 2005. And obviously, in a rapidly evolving technological world, they have become outdated. They speak to media, for example, only being radio, print, television, and they don't consider online content. And it is time, we believe, that we bring that type of media into the fold and ensure that they too are able to play by the rules that govern the sector.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge, of course, is that, in some cases with these podcasts, you have people that formerly were even broadcasters in the mainstream media space. And there's this assertion that once you go online, you've got so much freedom. You own the platform, you don't have any editorial framing that is, structurally there by any sort of institution. And so you've got the space to do and say as you please. And maybe if you could just unpack for us, because you do have also the Film and Publication Board that does regulate online content. So where are some of its short legs, if you will?
Okay, maybe let me start off by saying podcasts are a welcome introduction in the media space in the sense that they do have positive aspects. They create spaces for people to be able to engage. I mean, there's research done in terms of their contribution to the enhancement of cultural conversations. And indeed, many podcasters consider them to be what they call unburdened spaces. People are free to say and do whatever. However, as much as we will always protect the right to freedom of expression as guaranteed in our Constitution, we believe that all of these rights have limitations and none of these rights should infringe on the rights of others, also contained in the Constitution. These include amongst them, for example, the right to equality, the right to dignity, the right to privacy. And we appreciate that there will be from time to time tensions between these rights. And that is why regulation is an important intervention to ensure that all of these rights are able to coexist in the way that the Constitution would have intended. Now, when it comes to classification, so the Film and Publication Board forms part of the regulatory framework within the communication sector. They look at specifically online content. Now, you remember what I said that it was a challenge is that podcasts are not recognized as media in the sense that, we only have TV, radio, and print in our legislation.
Right.
So while the Film and Publication Board will demand that any online content, including podcasts, by the way, should carry classifications like your age limits, age-appropriate information, where in an instance such as Mr. Mukwevho's podcast, for example, if language which is considered not to be age appropriate for people younger than 16, I'm making an example, he should be carrying in there a classification notification that indicates. But we still have work to do, because if we don't accelerate, and this is something that we've been raising with the department, if we don't accelerate the finalization of the audio and audiovisual policy, you will continue to have these regulatory gray areas where online podcasts can just say that the rules don't apply to them. And unfortunately, the rules apply to everybody in terms of our constitution. And what we need to do is to ensure that the specific legislation in the sector catches up with the constitution, but also with the developments in the industry. There is no right that is absolute, as I said. But I do want to make a point, Naledi, if you'll allow me,
Sure.
just to say that we have no interest in South Africa becoming a nanny state. We come from a history of censorship. We come from a history where people were not given an opportunity to raise their views, their voices on any issues of the day. So we are not returning to that. But we are calling on podcasters, very influential figures, to ensure that they exercise responsibility with the influence that they have. And when we speak about regulation, it happens in the print industry through the Press Council. It happens in the broadcasting industry through the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. And these are self-regulatory platforms where the industry comes together and say, based on what ICASA has defined as codes of ethics within media, this is how we are going to conduct themselves. And this is how we are going to give an avenue for people who are aggrieved by the content of these podcasts to be able to raise those without having to go and find money to approach the courts, which, as we know, is a very restrictive, very exclusive, very expensive process. So our drive really is to ensure that we create a fair ground for podcasts to be able to thrive, but also to protect the rights of people in this country as those podcasts continue to grow and extend their influence, sometimes even beyond our borders.
Yeah. So then talk to me about the process that then comes, because legislating is not necessarily an easy thing or a fast thing to do, right? So, I mean, some of the concerns that you have around, how fast we're able to work, but what goes into now the work that needs to be done to form that framework and legislate?
Yeah, you're right. It's not a quick process. In fact, a few days ago, we wrote to the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies to seek to find out from him, why is it none of the very urgent legislation that the industry requires is going to be processed in Parliament this year? We are awaiting his response on that. But as far as the policy framework, at least the audio and audiovisual policy framework, which begins to deal with these issues that we're raising. We have received commitment from them that before the end of May, if I'm not mistaken, that framework will be published for comment. Work was done, I think, as far back as 2023, and then it had to be taken back, I think, based on the comments that had been received, but it should be coming out again. It's a good starting point. We also note that the Press Council and the BCCSA have also sought to extend their codes to speak to online content. And we're learning. I think we're learning in the process from countries such as Canada, such as Sweden, that have not only looked at podcast regulation, but the regulation of what is called the over-the-top platforms, because these podcasts need to sit somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So whether it is YouTube, whether it is Twitter. And interestingly, one of the issues that we are still mulling over when it comes to the issue of Mr. Mukwevho's podcast is the fact that that particular podcast is also carried on a licensed broadcaster, in this case, MultiChoice. And we are going to see clarity as Parliament from ICASA whether, given the fact that MultiChoice carries that platform, do the rules that currently exist around media ethics and the code of practice do not apply to all content that MultiChoice carries, regardless of whether it's sourced from a podcast or not. Because once it goes onto that platform, then it should definitely operate by the rules that govern the license that MultiChoice holds. So we are not going to be resting on our laurels on this issue, and we are going to be pushing the Minister of Communication to ensure that he moves as speedily as possible on this matter.
Yeah, and just lastly, before I let you go, you've got, of course, it seems that a lot happening in Parliament. This conversation that you're sparking now around needing to develop that framework. At the same time, you've got the Deputy Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Steve Ledzige, having, of course, expressed, quite some, call it disgust, if you will, with some of the comments that were made by this particular podcaster, but also saying that this podcaster, MacG Mukwevho, to be summoned to Parliament. What do you say about that process? What do you think of it?
Well, Naledi, I really can't speak on behalf of the Deputy Minister or the Portfolio Committee on Women, Youth and People with Disabilities.
Sure.
I think that they would obviously, use the platform to communicate their intentions. But I must say that the Constitution does provide for Parliament to be able to summon anybody or anyone on any issue that arises. I don't know how far the Portfolio Committee on Women has gone in processing the matter. And I think like everybody, we would be keen to see what justification, if any, because I don't see how you can justify the sort of issues that Mr. Mukwevho would have uttered on his podcast. But yeah, that is a process that is led by a different portfolio committee. So maybe I should just leave it there.
I just wanted your commentary on it. And I appreciate the time. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Of course, we'll be watching the work that you do very closely in really getting to the formulation of this framework. Khusela Diko, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies.